First off, Jonathan Genick is a fantastic editor. I went into the O'Reilly book writing process having done a project with John Wiley and Sons a number of years ago. Had a great editor there too, but Jonathan would be too humble to admit it, but one of the tremendous values of writing a book is that if you have an excellent editor, which I did, you learn a lot while you write. So he said at one point that, just a second, I can't, as it turns out, I can't sing and play the piano, I also can't type and talk. Hang on. I apparently can't type and not talk either. There we go. He made a comment that said that probably after he wrote, he was a lot more credible, even though he probably didn't know any more than before. I would venture to argue that you know a lot more after you try to write than, oh, look at that. That gave away one of my little funny jokes. Let me flip the screen. Let's see if I can remember how to do that.
Awesome.
Let's see. So to the slideshow, start up now. Sorry about that. There we go. Hi, I'm Cary. I've got 10 minutes. My title is The Most Important Trick of Performance Instrumentation. You've already seen my funny slide. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking horror. We do not use tricks, but I use that to get you in the room, so I'm sorry. All right. Here's my whole point, really. Performance is not an attribute of a system. And I will demonstrate that by introducing you to the notion of this thing called an experience. What you see here is a list of 6 experiences. We've got them listed in a table. Each has an ID. F. Chang had an OE book experience that began at 8/14/22 on September 15th. The response time for that experience was 2.019 seconds. And the last letter that's chopped off there is, it's hello. Power or keynote just dropped. There we go. The last column is labeled SLR. And there's really no data past that you need to worry about. But if your response time is 2.019 and your service level requirement is 2.0, then you failed to meet your requirement. So if we define the term fast as being when the R column is less than or equal to the SLR column, then let me collapse this table down a little bit, and you can see that F. Chang's 2-second service level requirement was violated by the 2.019 second experience. And the rest of these people, when they ran OE ship and OE pick and OE book and PA match, they actually get to claim that those experiences were fast. So as a quick little quiz, just to make sure that we comprehend what I'm saying, is would you call a system that looks like this, where the fast row values are all yes? Would you say that the system is fast or slow? And I think most people would say, well, it's fast. And most DBAs are cynical enough to say, well, we're probably not seeing all the experiences. There are probably some experiences out there that are slow. Well, clearly, if all the experiences are slow, you would be tempted to say that the system is slow. But the problem with talking about whether systems are fast or slow is, what do you do in a case like this, where everybody's experiences are fast except for F. Forbes' OE book, which was slow here? Or, do we say it's slow for F. Forbes and fast for everybody else? Here's another, even a little slightly more insidious example. We've got F. Chang, which in ID 1, F. Chang's OE book experience was fast, but in experience number 5, F. Chang, running the same exact thing, had a slow experience. So what do you say about the system? And my point is that we shouldn't say anything about the system. That performance is an attribute of the individual experiences that people have with the system. And if you think that way, if you sort of admit this kind of thinking into your mind, it brings a whole new schema into your head about how performance optimization works. Most people, when you think of Oracle performance, they think of performance being at the SQL statement level, an attribute of the SQL statement, but it's really not. A SQL statement, of course, has an ID and a task that it's associated with. For example, OE book might have 7 or 8 SQL statements. So there might be 7 or 8 different rows in the SQL table at the bottom that correspond to OE book. The task is where the name OE book would occur in this schema. And at the very top, which is truncated at the top of my slide for some reason, there's an entity called experience. And experience, I'll read you the columns that you can't see. An experience needs an ID, it needs a task ID, and then you can see the rest. So who had this experience? What were they trying to run when they had it? When did it start? When did it end? What IP address were they on when they attempted to fuel it? And this is what performance is. Performance is about people's individual experiences with systems. So that leads us to the so-called trick, and it's this simple. Each experience gets its own unique ID. So that's what I consider to be the single most important trick. That's it, it's this. Each experience gets its own unique ID. And a little bit about how to do that. Well, in SQL and PL SQL, we have this thing called DBMS application, DBMS application info dot set module. And I'm truncated on the left a bit here too. There's some comments and a couple of missing characters here. But essentially what I'm suggesting here is that we set the module name to the name of the task that you're executing. So in the prior slides when I was talking about OE book and OE pick and so forth, that's the module name. And then in the action name slot, I want to suggest that you think about putting a universally unique ID or a global unique ID there, a GUID. I'll talk about one of the complexities of that in a moment. When your task is done executing, the paragraph at the bottom here in this, you see my mouse pointer, on the bottom area, you set your module name and your action name to empty, to null, to the empty string. In ODP.NET, it's pretty simple. You can do the similar kind of a thing. In Java and ADF, it's a little more, lots more pixels, but it's roughly equivalent in simplicity. Now, a little bit of breaking news. In 12c, there is a new set client info method that supports this JDBC DMS metrics thing. DMS stands for Dynamic Monitoring Services. The set end-to-end metrics call that's been around since Oracle 10G is deprecated in 12c. And we've got a new DB op tag. It's actually kind of a little fleet of tags that can be associated with application threads. So it's good to know that Oracle's thinking about this kind of instrumentation that I'm describing. And there's lots more research that I need to do here. And of course, as happens at conferences, I was having a conversation a little while ago with my friend Lasse Jensen from Norway, who notified me that through the JDBC, even though the module and action columns in the database are 64 character wide varchar 2s, the JDBC restricts, I believe he said, the module to a 48 byte length and the action to a 32 byte length. Well, unfortunately, a UUID or a GUID is 32 characters plus 4 hyphens for a total of 36 characters. So fitting them into these structures may be tricky, but hey, if you're a developer, you figure it out. So what you get from doing this is very interesting, I think. Here's a table that's, again, truncated on the left a little bit, but if we think about, for each of these rows that I showed you before, having an action name or having the experience ID, and that's what a GUID looks like, is this 36 byte long thing. That essentially becomes the primary key on the experience table. And you can, for example, wow, there's a lot of truncation at the top. I'll make the slides available to you. But you can use, for example, dbmsmonitor.serve-mod-act trace enable. You can set the module name to the thing that you're interested in tracing, and you can set action name to the constant inside of the DBMS monitor package. There's a constant called any_action, which basically means, hey, I don't care what the action's called, any module that's OE book, I want you to trace that. So in this particular set of experiences, you can see that there's a yellow highlight on the OE book rows, indicating that if we execute the code that you can't see at the top, dbmsmonitor.serve-mod-act trace enable, module equal to OE book, and action equal to anything, then you'll pick up these experiences for tracing. If you do that, then you end up with trace data that looks like this, which can be sort of categorized and grouped by the experience ID column, which you also can't see the title of at the top. But basically, every time in the trace data this new action name appears, then the UUID that you've set for that particular action will carry through the trace data and allows you to do things like parse the trace data and find tables that look like this. This is a table that the first column is the action name, the second column is the task ID or the module name, and then the third column is the client ID. So the client ID consists, for example, here of the IP address and the username. And we can see things like, for example, A Green had an experience that lasted 3.15, whatever that number is in red up at the top, seconds long. G Lamb had an experience that lasted 3.115 seconds. All these are OE books that you can see here. These are literally the experiences that people felt while they attempted to run OE book over and over again. And within the trace data, we've got so much detail in the trace file that we can actually drill in and, for example, see why did A Green's experience last 3.162362 seconds, and we've got full complete data inside the trace file to explain where every microsecond of that time is gone. So again, to recap, my message here is if you assign each experience its own unique ID, you get all sorts of benefits which I didn't show in OEM and which I did show in the trace files. But the bottom line is give an experience a unique ID so that we have a handle that allows us to measure and diagnose what people feel. And what people feel is really what performance is. I added a slide while Jonathan was talking. Please buy my book. You can find it at Amazon, and it explains a lot of this stuff too. And that is all. Thank you very much for your time.